All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I am Dr. Becky Bowling. You're here for another episode of Chat with Green Aggies. Today, our focus is turf grass. We do have a special guest joining us today, and I will introduce him here shortly, but I do want to go around and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. Irfan, you're first.
Hi, I'm Irfan, and based at the Texas A&M AgriLife Center in East Texas, and I'm an entomologist focusing on greenhouse nursery and ornamentals.
Mung Mung?
Hi, everyone. I'm a professor extension specialist in the horticulture department at College Station.
Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Winsky. I am a county extension agent for commercial horticulture in Harris County.
Kevin?
Howdy, I'm the extension plant pathologist overseeing ornamentals and tree fruit here in College Station.
Chrissy?
Hello, I am Chrissy Siggers. I am the extension turfgrass specialist located at the Dallas Center.
Laura?
And I'm Laura Millard, here in downtown Fort Worth, commercial horticulture agent in Tarrant County.
All right, so today we are going to be talking about two big topics. The first is going to be thinking about turf diseases, especially as we're moving into the spring. And so here joining us today is Dr. Young-Hee Jo. Dr. Jo, would you like to introduce yourself, and then I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Sure. Young-Hee Jo, and I'm an extension plant pathologist and work on turf, rice, and recently pecan. So I have a very diverse plants I work with. And so today I'm going to talk about some turf disease. Actually, you can see those pictures. I just took it on my way today. And well, the term of disease is a suboptimal condition of the plant. And so all green is always, I think, it's suboptimal condition. So I said in broad term, this is disease. So because it's cold, and right now, and we're facing, I'm kind of worried about the freezing temperature in the next 3-4 days. That concern, because some of the turf start to green up, and after this cold front, they're going to be all brown again, okay? And so, dormancy is kind of normal, okay? And the grass is still, the stolon and roots are still live, okay? As soon as the temperature go up, they'll be rejuvenated. However, you can see the lot of green stuff in the broadleaf, and also point annual with annual bluegrass are very common. Any empty spot on your grass, so you can see a lot of broadleaves coming out. So when you walk over your neighborhood, you can see which based on the broadleaf or green weed growing on your yard, you can tell these grasses has been well maintained versus something wrong, or some kind of ignore the proper managements during the fall or last year based on this wheat coming through. All right, so it's a good time to kill those winter wheat with some herbicide. And Becky will cover some weed, but we throw some, some strong herbicide, usually non-selective. You can use the Roundup herbicide, non-selective herbicide, to kill the broadleaf. And since most of turf is brown and they are not active anyhow, so it's a good time you can kill the weed very efficiently with the non-selective herbicide, like Roundup. But if the grasses grow back and a little bit, see green, And then the non-selective herbicide will kill your grasses like this. Okay, so I mean, if you want to use those non-selective herbicides, I think this time is a good time. You can kill those winter weed or annual bluegrass, which is very difficult to kill it. All right, and so these grasses, I mean, in your neighborhood, they're pretty much brown, which is normal. And you can see the little bit green up. They start to green up because recently we have kind of warm weather. But again, there's cold fronts coming through our region, and then it's going to be completely brown again. Okay, but you can kind of see the lower area where those standing water throughout the winter time. You can see kind of a little bit different colors showing up. Okay, so the area has been infected by large patch. The fungal disease they are more prevalent in their have a higher moisture field. Okay, so they're kind of vague, but it's more kind of yellow in color. You can also see the like a little bit bleached color, and because of the neighboring adjacent turf is no infection, they start to green up, and so kind of they're a little bit greenish color because they recover pretty quickly versus the areas has the fungal activity was damaged. But actually this damages has been started in the fall, like back in November, December, and then the fungus is not very active in the freezing temperature, but it's a cooler and wetter condition. They could be start active again, and so I mean usually they'll eventually recover when it's March and April, when it's temperatures go up, will eventually recover, but it could be distinctive round unrecovered patch will be show up in April's in May, and which is looks ugly compared to the green grasses around it. But as I mean, if you can handle it, I mean, you don't need to spray fungicide because in April, May, the fungus is not very active anyhow. And then grasses will overgrow the infected area. So something that you'll find out those the previous year large phase symptom will show up in town in April's as temperatures go up. And a couple incidents I have contact from the field that, like a Bermuda grass, for example, during the winter time, they start losing the grasses. It looks like a patch, type. So, large patch can be a contributing factor, even if the Bermuda grass is relatively resistant to this large patch. But also in the more like a northern area, like the Dallas area, the spring dead spot can be another important disease. You can see it. The patch disease start to showing up from now, and then it's more noticeable in the springtime as well. So so that's something I can I've contacted and regarding those diseases. So what should I do for our spring turfgrass management in terms of disease management? So first thing, and at this time, I mean, we have to wait until this, the cold front passing, and so the temperature go a little bit higher. So that's the time that plants start to growing up. And then if some kind of patch disease is showing up, and if size is very small, and you can treat it with some kind of systemic fungicide, spot treat it, and that that can prevent some root associated other disease. And also, if your grasses are looks like damage and then I recover, make sure that your grasses are still alive. And so you check the roots and stolons. Even if the grass leaves are brown, healthy grass has a still green part in the stolons or the roots still alive. And in those cases are usually they will quickly recover and then produce a new healthy shoot. So that cases are the recovery is it'll be smooth and fast. But if your grasses are and there's no root, no plants, they only bare soil, and it's not going to be recover in as the time go or temperatures go up. So you should have the practice that you can do is you can remove the dead grasses and then you can do some punching or aeration that have a improve the the air circulations, and then you can input some a good soil into the soil area. And if this area is small, it will recover from the other healthy grasses and then kind of fill in pretty quickly. But if the area is too big, then you probably consider some find some small piece of sod and then place on those dead grasses. Okay, so and many growers or many homeowners, they attempt to put some fertilizer like January, because we have a very mild winter, January, and early February. We have pretty mild weather, 6 or 70 during the daytime. So a lot of customer or a lot of homeowner, they're trying to throw some fertilizer to make a green, but we like today we have still have a cold airs coming through our town, and so that means that the plants is not take those nutrition, and so fertilizer can be wasted, or they kind of drain with the water and rain. So hold those fertility fertilizers are make sure that we don't have any cold weathers, so that that will actually the best time is fertilizers when the grass is when it's fast growing. So we still have some soil temperature need to be raised a little bit, as the air temperatures go up. So we have some little time until those grass recovery is picking up. So I think that's the time be the fertilizer applications. So I think that's I have just updated regarding the disease management on turfgrass.
All right.
Any particular questions? Just let me know.
Yeah, do any of you guys joining us have any questions? Feel free to put those in the chat. Dr. Cenchrus, did you have, I know you said you'd gotten a couple questions recently. We don't have to talk about those today, but you're welcome to if you wanted to. Oh, you're muted.
Nope. I know how to use Zoom, I promise. Yeah, we can ask Young Key a few questions since he's on here. I got contacted yesterday for a Central Texas sports field that had some very large patch rings in their outfield. And so I know usually we tell them once the disease is present that there's not much we can do. Is that still the recommendation for them to wait?
So it depends. So it's if it's a high-end sports field, for example, their grasses looks like a patch disease, some fungal disease suspected, and I mean if it's spotted, and as soon as temperature go up, and I still recommended to some systemic fungicide and spot treated. But if it's homeowner, it's that maybe we don't, we're not recommended. I mean, it's going to be small spot and will recover in temperature go up. So, but it's the high end turf. I mean, we not only the large patch but also the in the cool season and wet, and also some pythiums can be a problem, and other take-up root rot. Also, those root disease are beginning to active in a cool and wet situation. So, you just go ahead to check their chemicals available. If they have it, some systemic fungicide, then I just go ahead at spray when it's. I mean, this is too cold right now. It's too cold.
Right.
Once those those we kind of warm up again, 50, 60, then go ahead to spray the spot treated. That'll be okay. And then watch out those patch area. If it's something damaged by cold or standing water or ice, and usually they're not expanded. Immediately when those temperatures go up and dry out, and those damage will be, I mean, looks kind of whitish bleach color, because that's mainly coming from those those upper leaves kind of freezing damage. So they are completely dry out, so it looks like a bleach. It's kind of shocking symptom, but it's a normal, and the use of the root should be okay. But if it's some kind of root disease associated, those the patch will be expanded. Okay, so if that's the cases, then definitely to some fungicide has to be put it in there.
Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joe. I really appreciate you joining us today. And I know that this is a topic that we always get a lot of questions about this time of year, and we'll probably continue to get questions about for the next couple of months. So I am going to go ahead and we're going to, Youngki, do you mind unsharing yours?
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about turf weeds. I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview of some of the weeds that you might be seeing now, mostly from the standpoint of identification. We can talk a little bit about some control options. We're going to focus a lot on annual weeds today because we're talking about prevention and pre-emergent programs. And typically those programs tend to be more robust in the case of annual weeds, where we're trying to interfere with seedling emergence, compared with perennial weeds that may be coming back by other means. And so we do have Chrissy on today, so I'll probably invite her to join me for some discussion about some of these. She's got some ongoing research in her program for a couple of the weeds that we're going to talk about today. So I originally set out to make this very Valentine's-y, but then I had a request from somebody I will not mention by name to incorporate some elements of the Lunar New Year. So I'm going to have a little bit of both mixed in today. So I'm kind of excited about that. So first thing I wanted to talk about are kind of some of the weeds that you might be seeing out now. And we have to start, of course, with shepherd's purse, because it does produce this cute little heart-shaped seed capsule that's just perfect for Valentine's Day. So shepherd's purse is a winter annual broadleaf weed you may be seeing kind of out and about right now. If you're curious about the origin of the name, maybe hit me up privately and I'll share the story. It has to do with the way that it resembles a certain part of a sheep's body that can be used as a purse. So anyways, you can maybe use context clues to figure that out. But it does have these really cute little seed heads on it. We are starting to see, I've seen some of these already start to die back here in the Dallas area. It just kind of depends on where you are. But again, these are winter annual weeds. And so for a lot of our winter annuals, that's where we rely pretty heavily on a fall pre-emergence herbicide program. And we did talk about that back in the fall a little bit here on Chat with Green Aggies. So you're welcome to go back and revisit some of those videos. Another couple of weeds that you might be seeing right now, POA annua, annual bluegrass. I saw a question in the chat about the best herbicide to control POA. So, and Dr. Joe kind of alluded to this, that it's very difficult to control. So just a little quick background on POA annua. So this is a weed where we see a very wide range in biotypes. It's highly adaptable. We see it on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. Every population is unique, and it's going to be very reflective of the herbicide history of that site. So we have seen this weed develop resistance to select herbicide sites of action within as little as about 3 years of use of a product, if that product is used very heavily. And so the appropriate herbicide to control it is going to depend highly on the history, the site history of the facility that you're working in. We have a wide range of options, and I am going to include here in the chat one of the grants that I'm on as a byproduct of those efforts has developed this kind of site of action poster. It's an overview of several of the different herbicides that are labeled for the control of annual bluegrass. It is currently being updated, and so we'll likely have a newer version of that out fairly soon. But for the time being, you're welcome to download this for free. It does a pretty good job of listing several different options that you have at your disposal and breaking them down by site of action. Because of course, our goal, particularly for the professionals that are joining us, is that we really want to ensure that we're rotating the sites of action that we're using to reduce the likelihood of resistance. That is really, really important with this particular weed, because we do see that it can develop some resistance issues pretty quickly. So annual bluegrass is also going to be pretty responsive to a fall pre-emergence herbicide program. And I did talk about in a previous Chat with Green Aggies that for this weed, we see that it can be very responsive to soil moisture and temperature conditions throughout the winter months. And here in Texas, this can mean that we have multiple distinct flushes of germination and emergence. So if you only put out your one-time fall pre-emergence application in September, early October, depending on where you are in Texas, it may not be sufficient to get you through the entire season. Maybe more appropriate to do a split or sequential application, depending on your location and the product that you're using, to broaden your window of control and help protect you against late season flushes of germination and emergence. Another grassy weed that we're seeing quite a bit right now, this starts to take over my backyard. It does keep things nice and green, very common up here in the Metroplex area and throughout Central Texas is going to be rescue grass. So this is one's going to have a little bit coarser, wider leaf blade than our POA. It's going to start to produce these seed heads soon. I get a lot of pictures kind of in the spring, early to mid-spring of these seed heads with people asking me what this particular weed is. So you can keep an eye out for that. It's rescue grass. Another one that we might see this time of year is going to be common groundsel. It's going to be sort of similar looking to dandelion, but you'll notice that there's multiple flowers at the end of each of these stems, whereas with dandelion, we're going to see one distinct flower per stem. It's also going to have more deeply lobed leaves. If we look at that genus name there, my horticulturist on here, what's a nice ornamental that's also a Senecio?
Cineraria.
Yes. And Dusty Miller. I'm pretty sure Dusty Miller is also.
And also a Mexican flame vine.
Yep. So for all of our unwanted, our poor undesirable weeds, we have usually an ornamental counterpart that we like to grow and we grow on purpose. So another one that we might be seeing right about now is going to be common chickweed. This is one that we'll start to see blooming fairly soon. It can take over pretty large areas, and it can also be an indicator of compaction and excess moisture, depending on where you're seeing it in the landscape. A lot of times we might see this under and around trees. So this is another one that if you've been wondering what this is, common chickweed. Henbit, this is one that I don't mind so much, but some people just really don't love to see in their yard, but it is in the mint family. You'll be able to identify that from its square stems. So if I pick up a stem of this, I'm going to be able to roll it around in my fingers. So henbit, another winter annual that we might start to see blooming around this time of year. So today we're really focused more on what's around the bend, what's coming as we move into spring and into summer. One of the first ones that we're probably going to see is this one right here. Anybody want to guess in the chat what this is? I gave you a hint with a little image down here.
Crabgrass.
Yes, okay, so crabgrass is one that we're going to see germinate. So this one typically germinates when our soil temperatures reach around 57 degrees Fahrenheit. And when it comes to turfgrass herbicide programs, this is one of the, I would say, 3 primary weeds that we tend to build our pre-emergent timing around. And so a lot of the recommendations that you see for spring pre-emergent applications are really based on the germination timing of crabgrass. And so what we'll typically see as a result of that is a recommendation to put out your spring pre-emergence application when soil temperatures reach around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. For 4 to 5 consecutive days. This is a point at which we might expect, just prior to crabgrass germinating at that 57 degrees. So, a lot of times, depending on where you are in the state, this can fall anywhere between mid to late February all the way through mid-March. So as you go further south, we're going to warm up more quickly. You may need to put out your pre-emergence application a little earlier. As you go further north and up through the panhandle, you'll be able to typically push that forward more and more, but it can vary a lot from year to year. We have some years where we warm up early or we get a little warm snap kind of early in the season. This can lead to some early germination. It can make it a little challenging to get our timing just right. When it comes to crabgrass, it is really important to make sure that we have a strong pre-emergence program if this is the primary weed that we deal with. Our post-emergence, selective post-emergence options for controlling this weed in turfgrass are very, very limited, especially if you have a St. Augustine grass lawn. It's a really, really short list. Many of those products are restricted to very, very early stage of growth in crabgrass in order to really be effective. And so, you may not even really be able to see those plants quite yet, in that time that those products are going to be the most effective. And so, unfortunately, this is one I get a lot of questions about really late in the season, July, August, when it has completely taken over a turfgrass area and people are desperate looking for something to put out to control it. And at that point, options are going to be really, really limited, and they're going to have very limited efficacy as well. So I cannot emphasize enough that if this is a weed that you've dealt with a lot in your turfgrass system, please look at a pre-emergence herbicide program to help protect you against the initial emergence of this weed early in the season. There's a lot of labeled options for pre-emergence control. These are going to be primarily professional products that I have on the screen here because that's kind of our target audience for this program. However, If you're a homeowner, if you're a master gardener, many of these same active ingredients can be found in box store products available to the average person. What you're going to look for is a product that says something like weed preventer or crabgrass preventer. A lot of times, unfortunately, on these box store products, they don't necessarily come right out and call it a pre-emergent. You have to look for a little bit different language. You may have more flexibility if you go to something like a feed store or something like that. They may have more options. And so Ronstar, Pendulum, Barricade, Surfland, all of these are going to offer some efficacy when it comes to crabgrass. Dithiopyr or Dimension is one that we talk about a lot as it relates to crabgrass, because it has some early post-emergence control, which means when those seedlings start to come up a little bit, if I've missed my window for my pre-emergent and I have really small seedlings that have germinated already, that Dimension is going to give me a little bit of control early on of those crabgrass plants that have already germinated, while still providing a barrier for plants that have not yet come up, whether it be crabgrass or other summer annuals that germinate just a little bit warmer temperatures. So that can be a nice option that gives you a little flexibility with timing, especially if we have kind of a funky year where we had an early warm up that we weren't expecting. Corn gluten meal is going to be a primary organic option right now when it comes to pre-emergence control. It is decently effective at crabgrass control. It's not going to be as efficacious as some of these other products that I have up here. And it does come with some other consequences, including that when you're putting that product out, you're also adding a lot of nitrogen. As Dr. Joe indicated, there are certain times of year that we don't necessarily want to do that. It can do more harm than good. Post-emergence control, once that crabgrass has come up again, Dithiopyr will offer early post-emergence control over those small seedlings. Quinclorac, which is an active ingredient that we see in products like Drive, Momentum. We also do find it in some select box store products, mixtures that say stuff like plus crabgrass control. You'll see that Quinclorac may be listed in that list of active ingredients. This is not a product that's labeled for use in St. Augustine grass systems. So this is going to be really just a product that you can use in Bermuda grass and zoysia grass systems. Imazaquin, which is Image, we may get some suppression. Celsius, we have some efficacy that we can get out of that product at a certain window early on in the season. Same with Tribute Total. We're going to be limited as to the time frame that those are going to be effective. Tribute Total, again, is not going to be an option for our St. Augustine grass systems. Oh, yes, I forgot, Mung. Here, do your little plug. You say it.
Goosegrass.
Yes, but I forgot about your mustard seed. I forgot about your mustard seed thing. So I mentioned corn gluten meal as an organic option. Dr. Gu has also done some research looking at mustard seed meals. And so she shared a link in the chat to go back, and she's presented on that on Chat with Green Aggies before. So yes, so this is another weed that we will commonly see germinating, emerging in the springtime in turf grass systems. Goosegrass, I would say that I see this less often in home lawns than I do in sports fields, parks, and golf courses. What about you, Chrissy?
Say that one more time.
I said I don't feel like I see goosegrass quite as often in a home lawn as I do in some other turf systems.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, because I think homeowners are doing less decompaction of their lawns than like a sports field or something like that. So not as common.
Yeah. So
Dr.
I
Bowling.
was gonna say compaction, because to me this one always looks like a goose is sitting on it. You know, it's flat, it's like compacted. Big old fat goose sat on it.
Dr. Bowling, just whenever you mention this goosegrass, it just goosebumps, it just comes up from everywhere. And by the way, I don't claim any ownership of this goosegrass. And when Laura said a goose, it just this is one of my favorite grasses.
Is it? That's interesting. This is one of my least favorite grasses. terms of identification, it has a fairly distinctive kind of silvery or white center, a lot of times in the middle of the plant from where the goose sat on it. It also has a pretty distinctive zipper seed head, but we won't see that a lot of times until fairly late in the season. And so this is going to be another summer annual. It is one that is able to tolerate really low mowing heights. So when we're talking about weeds that can proliferate on a golf green with that super short mowing height, Poa annua is one we see very commonly on greens in the wintertime. Goosegrass is one that we see very commonly on greens in the summertime. And so mowing frequently, mowing short, not going to be especially helpful with this weed. It is one that I see in areas that have compaction issues and are frequently cultivated for compaction and have that disruption of the seed bank. So it is just one that I just happen to see more typically in non-residential systems. Doesn't mean you won't have it in your home lawn from time to time, but I don't see it take over in those systems quite as often as some other weeds. So for this one, similarly, we're looking at having a strong pre-emergence herbicide program. It's going to be a little different from crabgrass, which I'll show you guys here in a minute, because it tends to germinate at slightly warmer temperatures than our crabgrass does. And so depending on the spring and how long it takes for us to warm up, there may be a significant time lapse between when we have that initial emergence of crabgrass versus when we have that emergence of goosegrass. This may mean that for us to really have an effective program, we may be looking at a split or a sequential herbicide, pre-emergent herbicide application in that spring window. And we've kind of talked about this approach to pre-emergent applications in the past, and I've kind of alluded to that already today when we're talking about fall applications. What we can do with pre-emergence herbicides is going to depend on the specific product and what the label allows. There are some products where we can make sequential applications at a full rate multiple times throughout the course of the year without exceeding the maximum rate. So for example, with Dimension or dithiopyr, I believe you can apply that product at the high rate 3 times throughout the course of the year without exceeding the maximum annual use rate. We may not have that same flexibility with other products. So we want to pay really, really close attention to this whenever we're thinking about our approach. And we want to pay attention to what that interval, that timing interval looks like. So a split application is going to be where I take the desired rate that I wish to use throughout the course of the season. I split it in 2. I make my first half at one point, and I make my second half at the interval specified by the label for that split application program. Now, the pros of doing this are that I'm prolonging my window of coverage. So this is going to be useful if I know that I have a wide range of weeds, or I'm dealing with unusually maybe mild temperature conditions or fluctuations where I'm either going to get several different kind of phases of germination as a result of species diversity, or I'm going to get several waves of germination as a result of fluctuations in my weather conditions. And so the downside to a split application is that I'm only putting out half a rate at a time. So this can affect potentially the efficacy of my program, because while I'm broadening that window of coverage, the rate is not quite as high. And so that's something that I have to be concerned about. I also, with some products, if I choose to make a sequential application, would be able to apply the full rate at a certain interval so that I put out 2 full applications throughout the course of that season to provide really robust coverage. Now, the potential downside of this is that even if I don't exceed my maximum annual use rate, the more of these products that I apply, the more possible it is that it's going to interfere with my turf grass green up. And this can be sometimes something that I need to be really cautious with, depending on how old or established my turf is. Another thing that we've talked about before is, when we're dealing with, for example, something like take-all root rot, gymnomyces. This is a disease that significantly affects turf grass roots. If I have had significant issues with this disease, and I'm applying these products heavily in a system where that disease is present, I'm going to run the risk that effect that that herbicide is maybe having on my roots may affect its ability to overcome or respond to that disease. And so it comes back to the old adage of pre-emergence herbicides are really intended for healthy turfgrass systems. If I have a known issue in that system, I may have to rethink my plan a little bit. Okay. Now, when it comes to post-emergence options, these options are a little bit more limited. There is some research ongoing to try to increase this list a little bit. Chrissy's done some research looking at some options for late season post-emergence control of goosegrass. And so I don't know if she can talk about that yet, but I know that's something that people are looking at and working on. A lot of the products that we have at our disposal right now either need to be applied pre-tiller, which is really, really early on before that grassy plant starts to branch out, or they're products that can potentially harm our Bermuda grass systems either temporarily or in the long term. Christy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so if you look at the post-emergence control list that Dr. Bowling has there, you can see tepramazone or Pilex listed on the bottom. Now, that used to be tested for removal of Bermuda grass out of cool season grasses, but we kind of figured out, hey, it doesn't work. So they're trying to find other ways. And so we found through some of our research that you can mix Speed Zone, which is a PBI Gaertn product. It's a 4-way product, just like your typical 3-way product, but it's got carfentrazone in it as well. And you can mix that as a tank mix with Pilex, especially if you're dealing with some large mature goosegrass that you want to get rid of. And we've seen a lot of high success rates with controlling that late season with those two mix. Now, like it says on there, you got to deal with a little bit of damage for about 14 to 18 days is what we were seeing. But typically, if you just use Pilex alone, it would be damage well on up to 3 weeks, maybe even to 4 weeks. And so that's some success that we're seeing so far with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually kind of cool to look at too. So Pilex and I think Tenacity, they're both carotenoid biosynthesis inhibitors. So they have a bleaching response in plants where they literally turn the plants bright white. So it's kind of neat. But it just depends on whether or not you're willing to tolerate that with your desired turf. So again, for goosegrass, to really get effective control, we may be looking at a split or sequential application in order to have both control of our early germinators like crabgrass and still have activity with goosegrass. Now, we do also have some products that have just a prolonged window of activity compared to others. And so that may be the other thing that you focus on too, is there a product that's just going to give you a longer window of coverage? Indaziflam is one that comes to mind, which is Spectacle, which may offer you a different type of coverage for a longer period. So, depending again on the temperatures, we may see that goosegrass germinates 4 to 6 weeks later than crabgrass. Again, some of that's going to depend on how quickly we warm up, what those soil temperature and moisture conditions look like. Again, we're going to have a fairly narrow window for early post-emergence control with some of those products that I showed listed. We may have some options for some late season control with other products, as long as we're willing to make some sacrifices as it relates to our Bermuda grass appearance. Here's another one that I get a lot of questions about every year. And then a lot of times, again, I get questions about this one when it's really late in the season. And so you may not recognize this at first because a lot of people don't actually know what the plant looks like for this. This is Sandbur. So this is going to be we have some annual species of this. We also have some perennial species of this here in Texas. We see it growing in just about all corners of the state. But what you will find typically to be consistent is that it proliferates in poor soils. Soils that are experiencing dramatic fluctuations in moisture, soils that are nutrient deprived, nutrient poor. And so it persists by outcompeting our turf grass. And so one of the first things that we recommend with this is that you do everything you can to give your turf grass the advantage by improving the quality of the soil. This can be achieved through more consistent irrigation practices to maintain soil moisture. It can be achieved through the incorporation of high quality compost material, either prior to planting or following cultivation practices. That compost material can have benefits whether you're dealing with a clay or a sand. If you're dealing with a sandier soil, it improves water and nutrient holding capacity. If you're dealing with a clay soil, it can help improve soil structure and aggregation. So you get a little bit of benefit no matter what you do, but you do want to make sure that it's a high quality compost material. A lot of times there's this kind of misconception that all composts are created equal. That's unfortunately not the case. And so nothing like making it yourself is what I would say. If you're really looking for the best quality, you might look at how you can make it yourself. Those are all things we can do. Additionally, if you're working with a sandy soil, my recommendation is typically to rely very heavily on organic and slow release fertilizer products. This prevents dramatic fluctuations in nitrogen and potassium availability in the soil. Both of those nutrients are very susceptible to leaching. And so, offering a little bit of that consistency may be beneficial to supporting the health of your turf by incorporating those organic or slow release products into your nutrient management program. Again, too, another thing that seems pretty intuitive, but it gets commonly overlooked is the importance of bagging and removing clippings whenever this weed is producing these burrs. These burrs are large, bulky, they spread easily. As much as possible, we want to avoid accumulation of that seed bank. We want to remove those burrs before they hit the soil. So when you know that, as we get toward the end of the season, anytime you have weeds that are flowering and producing seed, bagging and removing clippings can be a really important part of preventing dissemination of that seed that's going to cause problems next year. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before on here. Sandbur can be a little challenging from the standpoint of pre-emergence control. It has the potential to germinate at soil temperatures as cool as about 52 degrees Fahrenheit. However, it tends to hit peak germination at around 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot warmer than crabgrass and even goosegrass. And so again, this is where we may really want to rely on a split or sequential program to broaden our spectrum of control and try to have some additional barrier there, knowing that this is a late season germinator. And again, we have kind of a narrow window for post-emergence control and a very short list of selective options. So pre-emergence control labeled options, we've got Surfland, Dimension, Spectacle, Ronstar, Pendulum. Post-emergence control, really short list of labeled options. Celsius, Imazaquin, which is Image, and Katana. Two of these are going to be exclusively available as professional grade products. Image we can purchase as a professional grade product, or we can also purchase it as a box store product. The efficacy, I'm not sure if you may have some reduced efficacy depending on which of those formulations that you use. But very small list of options. And so really relying heavily on cultural management, really trying to fine tune your pre-emergent program. All of those things are going to be pretty important when it comes to that particular weed and trying to get it under control. Last one that I thought I would kind of mention, because we've talked a lot about grassy weeds, but we do certainly get some broadleaf annuals in the summertime as well. This is one that's a prolific seed producer. This is Spurge. Okay, this is in the Euphorbiaceae family. So when we bust these stems open, we'll see kind of a white milky sap inside of those stems. That's very consistent with that particular family. It germinates pretty late in the season. This is one that we may see germinate at soil temperatures up in the 80s and 90s, and it can germinate as warm as 100 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature. So this is one that we may see certainly show up as things get hotter as opposed to early in the spring. And this is also one where we're going to want to pay really close attention to the pre-emergence label to ensure that this product is on the label. Because sometimes many of the products that we lean on for pre-emergence control in turf, they're very oriented, they're very focused on grassy annual weeds. And so this may mean that we either need to add a product like Gallery or Isoxaben to expand that to have more control over broadleaf weeds, or we may have to look at a different product like Spectacle or Dazaflan that's got a broader list of weeds controlled on that product, just depending on what our target is. So, just paying close attention, this comes down to reading the product label. When you're dealing with a lot of broadleaf weeds, you may have to tweak the products that you're using to really get effective control. But the nice thing is too, that we have a few more options sometimes at our disposal for post-emergence control. You can go out and do kind of an early season broad spectrum application of something like what Chrissy was talking about, a 3 or a 4-way product. In Bermuda grass and zoysia grass, we have a little bit more flexibility to use products that contain 2,4-D, dicamba, mecaprop, whereas in St. Augustine grass may not always have that same option, or we may have some cultivars that are especially sensitive to some of those products like Floratam. So we want to just pay close attention to that.
Becky, there's a question in the chat.
I see that. Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Any research on isoxaben and the incidence of take-all root rot? So, Sam, I don't believe that there's been a lot of research, period, on the relationship between herbicides and take-all root rot. My understanding is that take-all root rot is a fairly challenging disease to study, and this really limits the types of research that can be done on it. You know, in general, what we know, and I don't know if Dr. Joe's still on or if Dr. Ong is on, but you know, my understanding is that this can be, first of all, there's a lot of diversity in biotypes with take-all, and we also do know that it can be very opportunistic. Anything that is either temporarily or chronically affecting the health of our turf, particularly the roots, can increase the likelihood or the susceptibility of our turf to that particular disease. And so again, it kind of comes down to, we really want to only use these herbicide products on turf that we know is healthy. If we're dealing with a high incidence of take-all root rot in a system, maybe we kind of lay off of pre-emergence herbicides for a spring and focus more on manual control and spot treatment while we try to encourage that turf to kind of grow out of that disease and recover. Dr. Joe, do you know of any studies that have been done on herbicides and take-all? He may not be with us anymore. I'm not sure. And I think Dr. Ong had to jump off.
No, I'm here. What's the question?
The question is, specifically, they were asking, Sam Hill was asking about the relation, whether there's been research done on isoxaben and take-all. My response was that I'm not aware of any studies that have really explored any of the relationships between turf herbicides and take-all. But I don't know if you know something I don't.
I seem to recall a bunch of years ago that there was someone that was doing some fungicide studies. No, herbicide studies and impact on take-all, but I don't ever remember reading a paper out of it. So sorry. Yankee would be the one who would be up on the literature, I suppose.
Well, I think is you know, the damage by the herbicide is similar to the take-all root rot disease. So that's something they confuse, but I don't think is the herbicide is not affect or to promote the growth of a fungus. It give a lot of stress on the grass, and those symptoms are very similar to take-all root rot. I think that's the reason that people confuse. But I don't think any research has been done in that regard.
No. Yeah, I don't yeah, Sam, I see your follow-up comment there too. I mean, I have similarly seen instances where over-application of both pre and post-emergence herbicides seems to lend itself to, I would call it enhanced susceptibility. You know, anytime you're stressing a turf with one thing, it's going to increase its vulnerability to another thing. And so that's why we really try to emphasize paying attention to your rates, not over applying, and not using, in particular, herbicide products. Even if a product is labeled as safe to use on that turf grass species or cultivar, it's intended to be used on healthy, well-established turf grass. And so, so certainly if we see, disease incidents, insect incidents, those are times where we may choose to lay off of those herbicides for a while, particularly broad spectrum applications, to ensure that that turf has all of the space to recover and to respond well. So Kay, I did share that list. I would not say that there is a quote best post-emergence herbicide for Poa annua. There are a lot of different options, and it requires a little bit of, first of all, it's going to depend to some extent on your turf species, because we have some products that are going to be safe to use on some species and not others for controlling that weed. And second of all, it's going to depend a lot on the site history, what's been used on that site before. So as I talked about kind of at the beginning, this is a weed that can develop resistance over time to various products. And so it's really important that we're rotating the types of products we're using, that we don't, quite frankly, we don't want to have a favorite herbicide. We want to have a program with multiple products that we feel are effective, and we want to rotate those products by way of being responsible with our handling of them. But that list that I shared, that poster that I shared earlier, and I can put it back in the chat down here toward the bottom, has an overview of several different products that are labeled for controlling that weed. And like I said, we will be updating, or Dr. McCurdy at Mississippi State is in the process of updating that poster now. It's undergoing peer review, and we should release that here in the next few months. So